Dear listeners, welcome to another exciting episode of the Africa Learning Together series. I am Jacqueline Jere Folotia, the Senior Foundational Learning Expert at the Association for the Development of Education in Africa, commonly known as ADEA, and I am your host for this podcast. Today's podcast is a continuation of the one we shared in September, which focused on education provision to community schools in Zambia through two organizations, the Reformed Open Community Schools and Zambia Open Community Schools, commonly referred to by their acronyms ROCS and ZOCS. In that podcast, we learned about the amazing work these two organizations are doing to improve the school readiness of learners in vulnerable communities through community schools in Zambia and the positive impact of their work on reducing the prevalence of class repetition and school dropouts while building the capacities of community and civic leaders. We also learned that this amazing work was being done through the School Readiness Initiative, which is supported by the Roger Federer Foundation. In today's podcast titled School Readiness Initiative in Southern Africa, Community Participation in Education and Learning, we will learn more about the foundation and its work to support school readiness in the region and on the continent. We have today Mr. Fortune Tembo and Ms. Martha Konje, the regional representatives for the Roger Federer Foundation, who have joined us to discuss this topic. Fortune and Martha, welcome to our session today. Before we delve into today's discussion, please, we would like for you both to take a minute to just please introduce yourselves to the listeners and tell us a bit about the Roger Federer Foundation. I think we'll start with you, Fortune. Over to you.
Thank you, Jackie, for having us. My name is Fortune Tembo. I'm a regional representative, one of three who represent the Roger Federer Foundation in the 6 countries where we work. My responsibility is in Lesotho and Zambia, managing our partnerships there. We have a colleague that is responsible for South Africa and Namibia. And Martha, who is with us here, will talk to you about her own work, but she's representing the foundation in Malawi and Zambia. Just a quick overview of the Roger Federer Foundation. It is a foundation, a family foundation, formed a little over 20 years ago in 2003 when Roger Federer became professional and decided that he wanted to do some good. And all along, over the past 20 or so years, it's been working in the area of education. Between 2019 and 2025, the focus is on school readiness, which we are going to be talking about today. And I'll ask Martha then to introduce herself as well.
Thank you very much, Fortune. Just to pick it up, Martha Konje, as Fortune has mentioned, I coordinate and support the program's work in Malawi and Zambia. Just to add on the introduction about the Roger Federer Foundation, is working in 6 countries in Southern Africa, but we also have programs in Switzerland. And of these 6 countries, we work through local partner organizations in all these 6 countries because we believe in building or supporting building the capacity of the local organization, which will ensure continuity of these interventions in the respective countries. So in Zambia, as you mentioned, following up from the previous recording of this program, we were working with ZOCS and ROCS. Those are our local partners. And in all the 6 countries, we have 2 to 3 partner organizations. And we work also very closely with the government, the Ministry of Education, or where the work on early education is sitting within the government ministries. So that's just about adding on the foundation. We have a regional office in Johannesburg. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fortune and Martha, for that background. So we delve into our discussion, and the first question I have is for Fortune. So, Fortune, could you please share with us the School Readiness Initiative context for much of Africa and the southern region of Africa? Over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. The context in the Africa region regarding school readiness and early childhood care and education is that all our countries globally in the Sustainable Development Goals, 4.2 in particular, committed that they would make sure that children um, have access to at least 1 year of structured learning before they start their first grade. That was one thing. The other thing that our country is committed to was that at the end of that 1 year, before they start their first grade, these children would be developmentally on track, which means that they would have done everything within their powers to make sure that these children get prepared and are ready for school in the main domains of development, which are namely socially, emotionally, in terms of numeracy, cognitive skills, and literacy as well. So, what we have then is a reaction to that commitment by all governments. But the situation in Africa specifically is that we had a history of children just starting grade one, coming from home, straight from home into grade one. And then we have had countries begin to provide what we would call early childhood development centers where children would come in. And over the years, these have largely been privately provided or by community initiatives. And with time, some governments have been able then to make these services public services. But in the main, most of our countries are still far, far behind in terms of providing at least 1 year of structured learning. So our context is such that right now we have very few countries that have put the right policies in place, and they have provided the right services and the infrastructure for that 1 year of structured learning before grade one, which means that in majority of countries, we still have these services being either privately provided or being provided by communities through their own initiative. We don't have trained teachers. Most of them are volunteers. And which means that by and large, when children start grade one, they are not developmentally on track. They are not ready for grade one, which means that that affects, later life, later learning, but also more importantly, it also has an adverse impact on human capital development in our region, in our Africa region. So, for example, if we were to look at the countries that have really sort of responded in the right way and closer to the ideal, you would have a country like Zimbabwe providing at least 2 years of structured learning taking place in public funded primary schools before children can start grade one. Then you've got then on the other end countries that have virtually nothing public funded, nothing in the their education system that provides this structured learning, and mostly children being still at home or being in privately provided early childhood development centers where they have to pay, which means that also then that marginalizes those that are economically challenged. So I think we are then on this trajectory where we want to see all these countries being in sort of like a Zimbabwe setup, where we have children in structured learning, public funded, with trained teachers, with a clear curriculum that drives them towards being ready for grade one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fortune, for that information. I think the one thing I took away from that is, the fact that your work, yes, you have partners locally, but you also work with governments. And I think I also loved the fact that beyond focusing on literacy and numeracy, you're also looking at social emotional development, which is also a key part of the development of children, as well as their preparation for later education and development as well. So I would like for our next speaker, Martha, to basically just build upon some of the points that you have highlighted around the importance of learners, having structured learning before grade one. Martha, why is this important? Why are we all, why is the foundation so focused on this particular, part of education? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jack. So, the foundation is focusing on the school readiness initiative indeed for a reason. One, as Fortune mentioned just earlier, we have the Sustainable Development Goal, and the Development Goal 4.2 is looking at two indicators. One is to make sure that children should have access to organized learning, at least 1 year of organized learning before they start formal education or grade one. And also, the other indicator is about the children to be developmentally on track as they are starting formal education. And from our assessment, one of the things that we've discovered, which was common across the countries where we are working, and also many as we've interacted, is that the children, the focus was mainly in primary, and there was little investment, as Fortune has mentioned, in the preparing children. So why we need to have the preschools, our children to have this access to organized learning, and not just organized, but organized quality learning, is that it is during this phase of preschool where we are laying a foundation for lifelong learning. And we know that the strength of any structure is based on how strong the foundation is. And it has been established through various researches that for a country to develop, for learning outcomes, for schools to have good learning outcomes, we need to have a good foundation laid in the children. So the preschool phase, it really provides that opportunity where we can lay a good foundation, where we can support the development of the children. We can lay the foundation for a development, for a child to develop in all developmental domains, which is critical as they start formal education or in primary schools. And that also supports their long life learning. If you look at studies have also shown that when you have children that have gone through preschool, retention in primary school is high. That means you have less dropout, you have less repetition. That is one of the economic values that you get when you have a good preschool and children they are exposed. But also just to also highlight that before children they can start formal education, we want to have these children to be developmentally on track, which means we need to take a deliberate effort to make sure that children they are prepared in all the domains which are critical for all the follow-up subjects. And children between the age of 3 to 5, before they start formal education, they are still developing. And if we miss to maximize their potential during this critical developmental phase, then we are going to miss them out. All efforts in primary school and post-primary school, you find that they will yield less results. So it is important, and it is against this that the foundation dedicated that our current strategy in supporting countries, supporting governments to achieve their SDG 4.2, but it's also a critical phase in the education. We should contribute to early education, specifically supporting children to be well prepared before they start formal education as a foundation, and to support their development before they start formal education. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. for that, very elaborate, but also, very clear explanation on the importance of preschool. As you were speaking, there are a couple of words that really popped out for me. So one of those words was quality. So it's just not about preschool education. It's ensuring that this preschool education that we are providing is of good quality. I think that's really important to emphasize. And then you also mentioned the terms maximizing their potential, that at this stage, when we provide quality preschool education, it'll help us maximize the children's potential for future learning. I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing this. So the school readiness initiatives focuses on communities, and a huge component of it involves community participation. So I would just like to find out, with regards to community participation in education and learning, why it's important, to include the community. What benefits can be derived from an approach like the one you are using to engage the community in the learning process of their children? Fortune, over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. The best way to contextualize the role of community in early childhood care and education is to maybe double back a bit and talk about the gaps that the Roger Federer Foundation found when we entered this space and wanted to make our own small contribution as well, together with other partners and together with governments as well, and communities. What we found, if I go through that, will take us to roughly why community participation is important. The first thing we found was that in most of our countries, we didn't have policy in place um, to enable children to access structured learning, early childhood education and learning, 1 year before, at least 1 year before they start the first grade. So it meant that at the political policy level, most of our countries could not enable that, because without the policy, then you don't have the budget, then you don't have everything else that hinges on that. The other gap that we found was that there was very poor or in some cases non-existent awareness of the importance of early childhood development, because if people are to put in place policies and fiscus commitments towards that, they need to understand why is it important that children should have structured learning and be ready for grade one. Why don't they just go straight to grade one, which was the history of most education systems anyway, that there wasn't any kind of early childhood development before grade one. So we noticed that there wasn't that awareness, and that awareness cut across all the way from community level all the way up to at policy level. The other gap that we found was that in most of the cases, even where people had this awareness and they were responding and they were providing ECD, early childhood development and education, quite often it was seen as something that is not so important, and so it was done by volunteers or by anybody who was available. So we didn't have competent, qualified teachers to provide quality preschooling. The other thing that we found also was that in terms of understanding people's roles and responsibilities and those of institutions as well, most of our countries were running short. Some were doing very well, others less so. Um, the other very crucial, important thing about early childhood development and education is that you need an age-appropriate environment. When you need the right services, age-appropriate infrastructure as well. That's another thing that we found. There was a whole smorgasbord of different responses. Some were good, some were fair, some were totally non-existent in terms of providing that. And so you find that these gaps are what then guided the Roger Federer Foundation to decide on what would be the priorities for us to partner around in these 6 countries where we work. We are working in Namibia, in Malawi, Zambia, South Africa, Lesotho, and Zimbabwe. And in these 6 countries, we decided to focus on 3 particular areas which are very much connected to the question that you asked. The first thing we try to do is to mobilize, create awareness, and make sure that all stakeholders around the child know their roles and responsibilities. And communities have a very important role as well. Government has an important role. Parents primarily have an important role. And so all these actors need to understand their roles and responsibilities. And that's where you find the community also. The other thing that we've decided to focus on as a foundation was to provide this age-appropriate environment and make sure, to enable all the partners, all the role players responsible to create age-appropriate environments, because we do this through partnerships. The third objective was we wanted to make sure that they were competent teachers who understood how children learn in the early years. And as you may know, that children in the early years learn largely through play. Play is the vehicle, although we want them to be ready in numeracy, in literacy, in their socio-emotional well-being. But the vehicle is play-based teaching and learning. And so we need age-appropriate environments for indoor play learning and for outdoor play learning. So we are of late talking about the outdoor classroom and the indoor classroom. But you also have the classroom in the community where these children are coming from. You also have the classroom in the homes where these children are coming from. So if we're to look at these three objectives, they really highlight what gaps there are and how we are trying to cover those gaps. And coming to the community, for example, even if you were to have a government that is very responsive and we have the school available and the classroom available and the trained teacher available, but this child is in a community that is not safe for the child to get to school, the school is too far, maybe it's not even doesn't have the right infrastructure in terms of roads and bridges that allow this child to travel from home to the school. That's where you realize now that if you don't have a community that is on board in terms of early childhood development, you will find that children will still face obstacles and will not be able to attend. And even if they attend, you might find that then that infrastructure becomes an impediment to optimal development. So it is very important then, as you have highlighted, Jackie, that communities, we raise their awareness. They become aware that early childhood development is the foundation for later learning. We shouldn't be responding when children are failing primary exams or secondary school exams or failing universities or failing to get employment or they are unemployable. We should be thinking about the foundation. They should also be aware that actually early childhood development is the basis for human capital development. If a country is to advance or a community itself is to advance and meet its goals, children need to have a strong, good foundation, and then everything can build on from there. So the centrality of communities is very, very important. And of course, all these key stakeholders, they have different roles and responsibilities, and all of them need to be sensitized. They need to understand their role and play it. Government, for example, would invest in the infrastructure that is required at government level. Communities would make sure that it is safe, it is school is accessible. They would make sure that there is the right infrastructure working together with the school and the government, particularly through school development committees where parents participate and communities are represented by community leadership. And so all these different players have a role to play. And I agree with you that central to that is a community that is well sensitized and responsive.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fortune, for that. So from your explanation, it sounds like the school readiness initiative obviously did its homework to understand what was pertaining on the ground and was then able to identify areas that it was going to focus on. And on these areas, I really love, the community mobilization. And I think that oftentimes it's an area that's usually left out when initiatives are being implemented in communities. So it's wonderful, that you've included them, understanding their importance in the learning process of the children. I also love the focus on the age appropriate environment. That is so key, right? These are young learners, so the infrastructure has to cater for them, from the play parks to the you know, yeah, the type of toilets that they use to the chairs that are available in the classrooms, if they even use their chairs, because learning through play doesn't necessarily mean sitting, on the chairs like, they would do in primary school. So I really love that. And obviously the element around teacher competency, very, very important in the use of play-based pedagogies. I think this is awesome. So it sounds like there's a lot happening, based on these priority areas that you have highlighted, and it sounds like you're doing some amazing work. But I think the issue with initiatives such as yours that are funded is the issue of sustainability, right? So if funding ends tomorrow, will the interventions that you have put in place be sustainable? And I would like Martha to respond to this question, this very important aspect of sustainability, which we know is a real issue for many projects or activities that are funded. Over.
All right. Thank you very much, Jack. So, in terms of sustainability, indeed, this is one of the critical areas that, as we were starting the initiative, the School Readiness Initiative, we had to seriously consider, because what's the use of investing if it cannot be sustained? So we looked at sustainability from a number of areas, or a number of perspectives. The first one was we had to look at what is the agenda? What agenda is this initiative contributing? And we had to find an agenda that is commonly agreed, and governments will be working on that, so that the initiative should just contribute to what the government is already doing. So if you look at at the School Readiness Initiative, is well aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, as we mentioned earlier, and all of the governments across in the world and in the 6 countries where we are working specifically, they are already working, have already priorities. Their priorities guided by the SDGs. So the School Readiness Initiative is just enhancing or supporting the government's commitment or efforts in attaining the SDGs 4.2 in their countries. So we see that even after our funding, if we would stop today, governments are going to continue with that, because it's already part of the work that they are doing. But also, one of the other things that we did was uh, we know for initiatives to be scaled up, you need resources, and it has to be aligned within the country's system. So the very first time when we went in this all the countries, we had to get government commitments. So in each country, we had to sit down with government responsible ministries to discuss there's an initiative, this is how it will support the government on achieving the SDG 4.2. And if they agreed, they said, okay, yes, they were aligned and they saw the relevance of it, then we signed the memorandum of understanding with each government, where we clearly stipulated issues of the rollout, issues of implementation, sustainability, what is governments going to do and what we are going to do during the course of implementation, so that this initiative is sustained. So roles are clearly stipulated in the MOUs. But also, we have invested in a capacity building. In terms of capacity building, we are building capacity of government, of the local partners, as well as the capacity of the community. So we are building capacity of government partners and community because we believe that once we build their capacity, they'll be able to do everything that we are doing. But within the roles between the government partners and community, our local partners, we build their capacity as facilitators. So they are there just to facilitate some of the processes, while government staff or officials at the local level, at district level, and national level, they are the ones that are doing together with the community. So when these are being done by government or community, it's part of the work that they are already doing. The other thing I wanted just to add is that following on the community participation, if you look at most of the activities that we are doing when we go to a school, to a preschool in the community, we just raise awareness, and then the community, they take lead in the doing of all the activities. In that, it becomes part and parcel of their development work. So if they don't know how to do improvement plans, we support it, train them on how they can do that, and they use that skill to develop improvement plans on even school readiness and what they can do. They do their own analysis. They're doing the linkages with the primary schools. They are forming groups and so on and so forth. So in so doing, we found that in the areas where we have even stopped to implement the initiative, because we implement the initiative for 2 years at a school. After that, we withdraw just to see how are they standing. We've seen that the majority of the schools, they are continuing with the initiatives even on their own. Lastly, the other thing that I can mention is that we've not brought external materials or resources in the country. What we've done is we've used the local content and used the local professionals to develop or to enhance, to develop any additional resource materials within the local context. So you have the capacities is already in the community, within the country. You have government taking part. It's built inbuilt or built in the government systems and processes. With this, we've seen that sustainability, we can guarantee that the initiative will continue. I think I can stop there, and then my colleague Fortune, if has something he can add.
Fortune, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Martha has explained it very well. Thank you.
Great. So it sounds like this element of sustainability has been, well thought of and is being implemented. And the one thing I picked up really was integrating the activities that you're doing with the education system in the various countries, as well as building the capacity of not just government officials, but partners and the community itself, as well as ensuring that the community is leading on some of the activities that the initiative is focused on. And more importantly, the idea that the teaching and learning materials have to be made locally with locally available material. So sounds great, and I'm sure all our listeners are really looking forward to learning more about this. Once your initiative has ended, how continuity or how sustainability then continues after the project has ended. Speaking of ending, you noted that the School Readiness Initiative is supposed to run from 2019 to 2025, which basically means that it comes to an end next year. So I would like to learn more about the plans and expectations regarding scale up, expansion, and reach beyond the 6 countries that you have highlighted. Fortune, over to you.
Yes, Jackie, the issue of scaling up is very important because as we began this conversation, we spoke about, the majority of our countries, not only just in Africa, but everywhere else, are on this journey of ensuring that children get at least 1 year of structured learning and making sure that the quality of that produces a child who's ready for grade 1. Now, we have seen quite a lot of interest beyond the countries where we are working. And one of the things that has drawn interest to the School Readiness Initiative is that we have moved towards 21st century skills in the way that we responded in these 3 objectives of mobilizing all key stakeholders, providing an age-appropriate environment, and in particular the 3rd objective of making sure that we have got competent teachers that can deliver this quality. So we decided to use the technology that is available to us in this current age, and probably even getting better as we go forward with AI and connectivity like Starlink and other satellite-based connectivity. So what we did was, with our resources for building the capacity of educators, we put them on a tablet. And that tablet can operate offline, it can operate off grid. And in that tablet, that's where we have the teacher resources, and teachers can utilize that in self-guided learning. There's a 10 module course in there. We have also digitalized assessment, which usually was paper-based and very laborious for teachers. We digitalized local assessment to see whether children are developmentally on track or not. And we also made sure that teachers have resources that help them build an age appropriate environment, work with communities, engage with parents. And all these are available electronically on a tablet. And that tablet only needs to be synced probably once a month or so to get the data backed and to feed the data to a dashboard where we can see what is happening in all the schools in all the countries. So in fact, wherever we are seated, we can see what is happening in terms of progress in all these countries. So it's almost real-time data that we get from our programs on the ground. So that is something that has drawn a lot of interest because everybody wants to be in the fourth industrial revolution. Everybody wants to make sure that they can get real-time data and make data driven decisions. And so that interest has come when we have met people at conferences, we have met them at governmental meetings that are regional or international. So that interest is there. And so we would love to scale up in terms of reaching more countries, reaching more children, and making sure they are developmentally on track. But that the other element also is the issue of quality. And so even in countries where they have responded very well, they've got, like an example would be, say, Zimbabwe and South Africa. They now have their children in primary school having structured learning that is public funded. But still, there is issue of, do they have the right quality? So there is even interest in those countries that feel that they have responded fairly well comparatively. And then when you talk of scale up, you always talk about finances, because you need the resources, right, to scale up. And as a small foundation, we are aware that we may not be able to scale up and reach all countries in the future, which we are planning to reach as much as we can going forward. So what we have done is that we have embarked on extensive engagement at regional level, at international level. We make our presence known, we share what we have, and we make sure that everybody knows that there are solutions to this problem that we are facing, and we are open to partnering with them. So even at the moment, we have reached out to countries beyond our current six in terms of networking, sharing with them our lessons, experiences, and even in some cases donating some of these tablets, because every teacher in our program receives a tablet which has got these resources. But we have donated as well beyond our current existing countries just to stimulate interest. We have also done another thing to mobilize resources, has been to engage also other donors. So, for example, in Zimbabwe, we have been able to bring in an additional 8.5 million from other funders to boost the resources that are required. We have done the same also in Lesotho, where we have mobilized funding from World Bank, funding from Global Partnership for Education. So we are also engaging other funders. In South Africa also, we have engaged a lot of funders that have funded sometimes scale up to a province where we are not there. So scale up can happen also through collaboration, through partnership, through networking. But ourselves, we would love to reach more children in the countries. We would love to improve the quality even where we have a presence already. But advocacy is also another very important way of doing that. And that really is about taking every opportunity where ministers of education are and their officials, and really showing them that we do have a solution and we could collaborate with them in order to scale up. So looking beyond 2025, I think you will still hear more from the Roger Federer Foundation in the School Readiness Initiative. We're already beginning to make our plans for that. And so I do not expect us to stop in 2025. We will be talking, maybe you will invite us back so that we can tell you more about what we are doing in our next phase of implementing. But definitely, we all need to come together as partners and scale up, reach and scale up quality as well.
Thank you so much, Fortune, for your explanation regarding scale up, expansion, and the role that other partners could play in this process. And I really like an important component of the project that you've discussed around the use of technology, harvesting real-time data and then making decisions based on data. I think that that's so important. So we have come to the end of our podcast. Before I give my closing remarks, I would just like each of you to just give us your last remarks, 30 seconds, just to give us your closing remarks. Over. I think we'll start with you, Martha.
All right, thank you very much. So I think just picking up from what Fortune mentioned about the scale up, we've also brought in the private sector in the early education because they have been a silent participant because of maybe limited awareness. So in some of the countries, we've really worked with governments to bring in the private sector so that they can increase investment in the early education, scaling up either supporting part of the school readiness initiative or the entire component. And as Fortune has mentioned, we also have other donors that have looked at the initiative and said, this is a very good initiative. Can we support even a scale up of this up to 2028? So that's what Fortune has also been talking. But all in all, what I can say is all these materials that we have developed in the under the School Readiness Initiative, the self-guided course, the formative child assessment tools, which really help the teachers to assess and monitor development of the child so that as they are starting grade one, they are developmentally on track. Materials that promote learning through play, how they can come up with a play park, how they can create a classroom outside in the play park, but that supports development of the child in all developmental domains. All these materials are available for free. They can be used by in an individual school. They can be used by an organization. They are available from Google Play Store. So we've made these materials available so that wherever they can add value, let people use these. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha, for those remarks and for highlighting the private sector engagement that you are involved in. I think they too are an important player in the provision of education. Fortune, your closing comments, please.
Thank you, Jackie, for having us. I think in closing, I would like to urge my fellow Africans that if we are going to attain the Agenda 2063 goals that mean so much to all of us in our region, I think I would like to emphasize that all that will come to nothing if we don't build a strong foundation, because all those goals and ambitions that we have in Agenda 2063, they are based on making sure that our children have a good start to education, and everything else would fall from that. I would even go further and say, even before we talk about early childhood development, the first 1,000 days initiative means that we have to make sure that our mothers, even when our babies are still in the womb, that our mothers are getting the right nutrition, they are getting the right access to good health care, they are psychosocially healthy, because even by the time the child comes to age 2, 3, thereabouts, and they are beginning their early childhood development education journey, a lot would have happened in terms of brain development. So we need to start from the beginning, 1,000 days, and then from there make sure that we have a strong foundation to build our 2063 agenda.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fortune, for those remarks. Both Fortune and Martha, it's been a pleasure having you here. I certainly hope that our listeners enjoy this podcast as much as I have. Um, today. I think that a lot of the information that you have shared is very useful, and I really want to thank you both for joining us today and for sharing with our listeners the amazing work that the Roger Federer Foundation is doing to promote school readiness in vulnerable communities in Africa. So the work of the foundation is clearly invaluable in preparing learners for future learning and indeed um, you know, uh, future human capital on our continent. And we hope that countries and our listeners, wherever you are in the world, will find information from this podcast useful and hopefully, reach out to the foundation. So please visit the foundation's website to learn more about their work. Martha, Fortune, it was a pleasure discussing the Foundation's work with you. Thank you again so very much for this informative discussion. And to our listeners, thank you for always listening to our podcasts. Have an amazing day.